Welcome to Mr. Chalk's Revision Tips. In this video, we will look at...
we'll look at testing for positive ions and testing for negative ions. So, an acid such as dilute hydrochloric acid is added to a test of something to test for carbon dioxide. Right, so carbon dioxide gas bubbles are given off if a carbonate ion is present. Right, lime water can be used to confirm this because when carbon dioxide passes through lime water, it turns from clear to milky white as solid calcium carbonate is formed. So, in this question is about the reactions of ethanoic acid and the analysis of salts. So the diagram shows the apparatus used to investigate the reaction of ethanoic acid with calcium carbonate. Describe the change that you would see. So in tube A, you'd see it fizzing as bubbles of carbon dioxide would be given off, and in tube B, as the bubbles of carbon dioxide went through, the lime water would turn milky white as calcium carbonate was formed. Dilute sodium hydroxide solution is used in tests for some metal ions which form metal hydroxides that are insoluble. This means that metal hydroxides appear as precipitates. So for instance, copper sulfate solution reacts with a few drops of sodium hydroxide to form a thick blue precipitate. So if we're looking at describing a test to show a solution contains copper 2 ions, you are adding sodium hydroxide to it and looking for that blue precipitate. Why do we need to be careful when using sodium hydroxide? It's because sodium hydroxide is corrosive. And why do we need to be careful when using copper sulfate? It's because copper sulfate is toxic or poisonous. Dilute sodium hydroxide ions can be used to, like we've said, test for positive metal ions. So an example of the reaction that would happen is shown to the side in that diagram. So if you want to have a go at this, think about what you've just looked at, then write equations for the reactions of those following sulfates underneath to see or try and show what would happen. Different metal ions produce different flame cores when they're heated strongly. This is the basis of the flame test. So in order to confidently identify which ion is present, the result for the test should be unique and not be caused by another ion. So for instance, lithium causes a red flame, sodium causes yellow, potassium causes a lilac, calcium is a orangey red, barium for instance is green, and copper is a bright blue. So three of these chemicals are lithium sulfate, potassium chloride, and sodium nitrate. So a student wants to carry out a flame test to identify these, describe how they would do it. So you would go, get a sample on the end of a wire loop, then you would go and put it into a roaring flame and see what colour was produced. So what colour is produced for a lithium flame? That would be red. What colour is produced by a calcium flame? That would be orange. So the student is given 4 different samples of metal ions dissolved in water and has to identify what metal ions are present in each. So describe how the student could work this out. So some of the things that you could put in your answer is you were talking about doing a flame test. So the same as before, using the wire loop, put it in a blue flame, observe the colour and compare the colour to your known samples. Chlorine, bromine and iodine are halogens. So these ions are called halide ions. So halide ions in solutions are detected using silver nitrate solution. So the test solution is acidified using a few drops of nitric acid and then a few drops of silver nitrate are added. So dilute nitric acid and silver nitrate solutions are added to the solutions of 3 chemicals. A white precipitate is formed. So which chemical produces a white precipitate? That would be potassium or potassium chloride, more precisely. Which would produce cream precipitate? It would be a bromide. And why is nitric acid added? It's to go and remove any of the carbon dioxide from the solution, or any of the carbonate ions from the solution. Sulfate ions in a solution are detected using barium chloride solution. The test solution is acidified using a few drops of dilute hydrochloric acid, and then a few drops of barium chloride solution is added. So white precipitate of barium sulfate forms if sulfate ions are present. So if we're looking at describing that test, you're adding barium chloride, add a bit of hydrochloric acid, look for a white precipitate. What is a precipitate? Right, a precipitate is the solid that forms. And finally, so a class of students has been doing an investigation into a range of chemicals. So for the chemicals in the bottle, describe how these ions could be tested for. So with sodium iodide, you could test for the iodide using silver nitrate, which will turn yellow, and then test for the sodium by using a flame test, which will turn yellow. For the potassium sulfate, you could test for the sulfate using barium chloride, and then use a flame test to test for the potassium, which will give you a lilac flame. For the copper carbonate, you could test for the carbonate ions by adding acid and then using lime water, and the flame test would be blue to show that copper was present. And for copper sulfate, you could test for the copper by adding sodium hydroxide, which would give you a blue precipitate.
Thanks for watching.